Welcome back to Insights. I'm joined by ACC Professor of Political Science, Tim Kuhnlein. And Tim, we were just talking about foreign policy, and one of the biggest figures, I guess, when it comes to foreign policy is the Secretary of State. And Trump, over the past couple of weeks, made his appointment, and that's Rex Tillerson. So let's talk a little bit about that appointment, the Secretary of State, and Rex himself.
Well, clearly, this appointment of Secretary of State is kind of alarming to a lot of people because of the role of ExxonMobil and its connections to Russia. But I think, again, the larger picture here, backing away from the problems associated with that, potential problems, is more the trend here. I mean, we've seen several people from specifically Goldman Sachs on Wall Street be appointed, and mixed associations with some of these international dynamics. The core of the appointments has been white men and wealthy, business-oriented people, multiple people in the millionaire and billionaire club. But beyond that, we see a very strong sort of hardline presence in the military, which has to do with foreign policy, obviously, and now the integration of the oil industry as a very prominent presence in the foreign policy collection of executive branch positions. You've got Secretary of State, the recent appointment of Secretary of Energy, and then the Secretary of Interior even, which has to do with our natural resources. There's a lot of emphasis here on oil, a lot of Texas influence.
Yeah, you use the Texas Rick Perry, obviously, for Secretary of Energy.
And so when you think about it this way, and you reflect on what we were just talking about, I think there's going to be a very resource-driven foreign policy related to economic development of our nation. Will engage in the international arena on that premise and retract on some of the other more traditional human rights positions or the sort of the nation building, spreading democracy that both Democrats and Republicans have supported, and in many cases Republicans more so than Democrats. So I think that when you step back and think about that, then the question becomes, okay, who is this Tillerson? What is the Exxon role here? I mean, it's a country in and of itself. I mean, there are something like about 100 corporations that are up in the top 100. The top, we've got about 200 countries defining the globe. And when you take those 200 countries, half of them don't even qualify as the most powerful influences in the world. It's actually corporations that replace them because they have more economic value and more power. And they're being increasingly sort of beyond national boundaries. Exxon is one of these. And with the connection now with Russia and the attempts here to further capitalize, exploit the oil and general fossil fuel resources in the European continent and the Arctic and so forth. This is really raising questions about what will our association with Russia be. I mean, Russia's been our ally in the past. It can be our ally again. It's just that hasn't been the recent history.
And with a leader like Putin who's very controversial, it's interesting to have a relationship with a leader like that.
And rightfully so, because this is a KGB guy, a supposed Democrat, meaning he's a pro-democracy guy, but he has, something like 5 times he's been prime minister, then president, prime minister, president, prime minister, president. He goes back and forth. He's altered the Constitution to guarantee his position, his grip on power. This is an authoritarian system of government. There's no question about that. And, it's not as if we haven't been in bed with these types of people before, but are we really going to go here, and what are the repercussions? You factor into this the whole hacking issue around the election. It really does beg the question of where this might be going. I think the other part of this is when you look at who the appointments are and where they're coming from, as much as we like to think we're separating, that government is serving as a sort of check on a larger global economic system and national system, we're really seeing industry embedded in government. Not only are they rent seeking from government, in other words, making a lot of money off of government contracts, but now they're embedded so deeply in the institutions of government that it really, who's watching the hen house?
Right, and it's kind of like, are they going to use this for their own company's interests? Like someone like Rex Tillerson, who's ExxonMobil CEO, he could gain a lot of benefit from having a high political
And
office.
personally, and this is the question, will this policy be driven by national interests or individual interests, corporate interests? And they're one and the same to a certain extent, but how these resources are distributed and what we will defend, what we will excuse in the pursuit of these end goals, depending on what they are, is a big issue. Will we overlook human rights violations, which flies in the face? Will we overlook national interests in pursuit of not upsetting the apple cart, when in fact we need to stand firm on certain principles? Or the whole spirit of the American presence could be lost.
And let's talk specifically about Rex Tillerson. What his appointment, the significance of it? Because there's talks about someone like Mitt Romney taking over as Secretary of State, or someone with a political background, but he went kind of the opposite direction and took a businessman. So what's kind of significance about that, and why do you think Donald Trump picked a guy like Rex Tillerson?
I think because he knows the industry, he knows the international culture. He is able, probably like Trump is engaging, to leverage relationships and cajole certain
Kind
interests.
of like a business acumen.
Right. And I think ultimately we're at a state where who controls the resources of the globe. Not that we need the oil of the Middle East to function as a nation, just like we didn't need it in the context of the middle of the 20th century, but if our enemies control it, it's greater threat to us.
Right.
And so we invest a lot of energy, no pun intended, maintaining control of as broad a swath of this landmass that contains these resources as possible. And if we can develop a relationship with Russia, even though we have historic antagonism with them, and this brings us to the issue of NATO, which I think we're going to talk about in a little bit, it could be a game changer in terms of the geopolitical structure. Russia, the European Union, the United States, the North Atlantic Alliance working together. China's another story, but that really puts into question again, where is the Middle East in all of this? And historically, it's been caught in the middle for centuries during the imperial expansions of various actors. And this is really no different. It's just that it's hard for us to change our mindset. This was the former Soviet Union. It claims to be democratic. It's not. But they're, in many respects, the same actors. And Tillerson comes into this equation as a good old boy. But I think it's a signal of what the focus will be. And of course, energy drives the world.
Right. So we're going to leave it at that, but we're going to be with more insights after the break, so stay tuned, don't go anywhere.